Have you ever wondered how much of your life is real, and how much is an illusion you've crafted for yourself? Not illusions made by others, but the ones you created to survive, to be admired, to feel safe. There's a silent force inside every human being, a hidden magician. This magician's job is to shape your identity, to hide what feels dangerous, and to convince you that the mask you wear is your true face. The greatest illusions aren't on a stage. They happen inside your mind. And the question is, do you even notice when you're performing? We grow up believing we're being honest about who we are. But from childhood, we learn the art of illusion. A child learns to smile when sad because their sadness wasn't welcome. A teenager pretends to be fearless while hiding anxiety. An adult projects confidence while quietly crumbling inside. Every one of us, whether we admit it or not, has a part of ourselves we keep out of sight. That part is what Carl Jung called the shadow. And often, the most clever and dangerous shadow is the one we build consciously, the magician's shadow. The magician's shadow is not evil, it's protective. It was born the moment you realized that your real feelings, your real needs, and your real fears might be unacceptable. So, you constructed a version of yourself, a mask you could show the world. Maybe it's the high achiever, the caretaker, the joker, the rebel, the invincible one. Whatever the role, its job is to captivate others, to misdirect attention away from your vulnerabilities, and to shield you from rejection or humiliation. But like every illusion, this comes at a cost. The cost is that while you perform for others, you forget who you are without the performance. You start to believe the character you created is your true self. And the longer you wear the mask, the harder it becomes to take off. You forget how to feel without filtering those feelings through your magician's persona. And little by little, you become a stranger to yourself. We live in a culture that rewards the magician. The more convincing your act, the more applause you get. The world loves confidence, charm, and success. It loves those who can tell a good story about themselves. But what the world rarely sees is the exhaustion behind the curtain. The anxiety of keeping up appearances. The gnawing emptiness of performing a role that doesn't nourish your soul. You may not realize it, but you can feel the magician's presence when you catch yourself laughing when you don't mean it. When you hear yourself agree to something that feels wrong. When you say you're fine when you're breaking. Every time you betray your authentic feeling to preserve an image, the magician's shadow is at work. What makes this so powerful is that it operates in subtle, unconscious ways. The magician isn't always obvious. It doesn't always wear a grand cloak and wave a wand. Sometimes it whispers convincing thoughts like, if I let them see my weakness, they'll leave. Or I need to be the strong one no matter what. Or it's better to stay quiet than to be rejected. These inner scripts become spells you live under, shaping your choices, your relationships, your sense of worth. But what if you could notice the trick? What if you could interrupt the spell before it takes hold? What if you could step off the stage of your own life and meet the person waiting in the wings? The one you've hidden but secretly longed to remember? To do that, you have to understand how the magician's shadow operates. Its primary tool is distraction. It diverts your attention from what's painful by making you focus on what's impressive. It leads you to chase external validation instead of inner peace. It convinces you that being loved for your mask is safer than risking being seen for who you truly are. The magician loves drama and spectacle. It thrives in moments when you feel the need to over-explain, to impress, to charm your way out of discomfort. In those moments, you can feel the illusion forming. Your words become practiced. Your posture shifts. Your voice changes. You feel a distance growing between what you say and what you actually feel. That's the magician stepping in to protect you. But every time you let it take over, you move further from your authentic self. The magician builds walls between you and your own heart. And though those walls might feel protective, they also isolate. You start to wonder why no one truly knows you, why connection feels shallow, why joy feels fleeting. It's because true connection is only possible when you show up as yourself, not as the character you've constructed. The irony is, the parts of yourself you believe are unlovable. Your fears, your grief, your imperfections are the very parts that make you human and therefore relatable. People don't connect to your polished persona. They connect to your rawness, your honesty, your courage to be seen without the performance. That is what touches hearts. That is what dissolves loneliness. And yet, dropping the act feels terrifying. You wonder, what will people think? What if they reject me? What if I fail without this mask? Those fears are real. They come from deep places in your history, times when authenticity may have been punished. The magician was born in those moments as a survival mechanism. It isn't your enemy, it was your protector. But now, it keeps you from the life you long for. The path forward isn't about banishing the magician. It's about seeing it clearly, recognizing when it takes over, noticing when you start performing. You don't need to shame yourself for it. You simply need to name it. Say to yourself, "There's the magician again." That simple act of awareness begins to dissolve the spell. And then you have a choice. You can continue the performance, or you can risk vulnerability. You can let yourself say, "Actually, I'm not okay," or "I don't know the answer," or "I need help." Those moments might feel small, but they're revolutionary. Every time you drop the act, you reclaim a piece of yourself. As you practice this, you'll notice something strange. The people who matter will draw closer to your authenticity, not your mask. They'll feel it. They'll recognize the courage in your honesty. And those who only loved the performance will drift away. And that's okay, because you weren't made to be everyone's illusion. You were made to be someone's truth. You'll also begin to feel a strange kind of freedom. The freedom of not having to impress. The freedom of not needing to explain. The freedom of feeling sadness without apology, joy without justification, anger without guilt. You'll remember what it's like to inhabit your own skin without a script. And from there, a deeper kind of magic begins to unfold. Not the magician's trick, but the magic of real presence. The ability to sit with your emotions without numbing them. The strength to hold your ground without aggression. The wisdom to know when to speak and when to stay silent. This is the magic of being fully, fiercely, tenderly alive. This isn't a one-time revelation. The magician's shadow is clever. It will try to reclaim control. It will whisper, "Just this once, let's keep the mask on." You'll be tempted, and sometimes you'll give in. That's human. The work is not to be perfect. The work is to return again and again to yourself. Because every time you choose honesty over illusion, you weaken the magician's hold. Every time you risk showing your heart, you rewrite the old story. Every time you step out of the spotlight and into the quiet truth of who you are, you reclaim your life. And isn't that why we're here? Not to be perfect, not to impress, not to perform, but to be fully alive. To love, to ache, to stumble, to rise, to connect. Not as the magician, but as the beautifully flawed, endlessly mysterious human being you were always meant to be. The danger of the magician's shadow is not in its obvious moments, but in the subtle, quiet places. It shows up when you catch yourself pretending to be interested in a conversation you don't care about, when you nod in agreement while your stomach knots in protest, when you tell yourself, "I don't mind," even though you do. These are the moments where the magician weaves its invisible spells, layering one small betrayal on top of another, until, years later, you no longer recognize the person you've become. Most people never question this. They assume the roles they play are inevitable, that survival demands performance. And for a time, maybe it did. Maybe those masks helped you navigate unsafe environments, indifferent parents, critical authority figures, a society that made it dangerous to be soft, tender, or uncertain. But what protected you then is suffocating you now. The magician was meant to be temporary. It became permanent because you forgot you had a choice. The truth is, we don't hide because we're weak. We hide because, somewhere along the line, life taught us that being fully visible would cost too much. That if people saw the whole truth, our longings, insecurities, contradictions, they would abandon us. The magician promised to protect us from that pain. And for a while, it worked. Until the loneliness it created became worse than the rejection it was trying to prevent. And so, the healing begins not with grand gestures, but with small, rebellious acts of honesty. When you admit to yourself, "I'm exhausted from pretending." When you look in the mirror and ask, "Who would I be without this act?" When you let one person, just one, see you without the performance. These are acts of quiet revolution. Not because they're loud, but because they reclaim something precious, your real life. The path through the magician's shadow is not linear. It is a spiral. You will have moments of clarity, followed by days of slipping back into old patterns. You'll reveal your heart one day and hide it the next. You'll swear you're done performing, then find yourself in another conversation where you can't resist the pull of the mask. This is not failure, it's the work. Unlearning is not instant. It's gradual, messy, and profoundly human. One of the magician's cleverest tricks is making you believe you are alone in this, that everyone else has it figured out, that you are the only one who doubts, who fears, who hides. But look closely. Underneath the surface, you'll find that everyone you meet carries their own shadow. The colleague who seems unshakable, terrified of being seen as weak, the friend who never stops joking, desperate to be taken seriously, the partner who never asks for help, afraid to be a burden. We are all hiding. Some just hide better than others. There is a particular kind of tenderness that arises when you realize this. When you stop judging others for their performances because you see yourself in them. Instead of resentment, you feel compassion. Instead of competition, you feel kinship. And slowly, you begin to understand. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be real. What makes this even more complicated is that society is built to reward illusion. Social media is an altar to the magician's shadow. Every carefully edited image, every curated caption, every selective highlight reel reinforces the idea that only polished, beautiful, successful versions of ourselves are acceptable. The unfiltered self, raw, messy, incomplete, has no place there. And so, the magician thrives, weaving new masks, new stories, new performances. And yet, beneath this surface-level perfection, people are starving for authenticity. We crave it in the songs that make us cry, in the strangers who tell us the truth, in the rare moments when someone dares to be fully themselves. We ache for it because it reminds us of something we forgot, that it's okay to be whole, even in our brokenness. That vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. That the only thing lonelier than being unseen is being seen only for your illusion. So how do we begin to dismantle the magician's shadow? The first step is awareness. Start noticing when you're performing. Pay attention to the moments your words don't match your feelings, the times you shrink yourself to be liked, the times you inflate yourself to be admired, the places where you hide the truth because you're afraid of what might happen if you spoke it. And then, curiosity. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of right now? What am I trying to avoid? Whose approval am I chasing? Whose disapproval am I fearing? What part of me feels unsafe being seen? These questions won't always have easy answers, but asking them is like turning on a light in a dark room. The shadows lose power when illuminated. One of the most powerful practices you can do is silence. Not the kind of silence where you distract yourself with your phone, music, or endless tasks, but the kind where you sit with yourself in stillness, where you listen to the quiet voice beneath the magician's performance. At first, it might be uncomfortable. You might feel restless, anxious, exposed. But if you stay, if you keep breathing, you'll begin to hear something else. The voice of your truest self. The one who doesn't need to perform, who doesn't care about applause, who isn't interested in perfection. The one who is content to simply be. It might speak in fragments at first, in images, sensations, memories. It might remind you of who you were before the world told you who to be. A child building forts from pillows, a teenager staring at the stars, dreaming of something nameless. A moment you laughed so hard you forgot to be self-conscious. These are the breadcrumbs that lead you back to yourself. And you'll notice, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes to notice when the magician shows up. You'll feel the tension in your shoulders when you're about to lie, the shift in your voice when you exaggerate, the emptiness after a conversation where you played a role instead of speaking your heart. These sensations aren't punishments. They're signals, clues from your body that you've left yourself again. The magician isn't bad. It's a part of you, a part that once saved you, a part that deserves your gratitude for getting you this far. But now, it's time to give it a new job, not as your master, but as your ally. You can let the magician's charm remain, but not as a shield, as a tool. To uplift, to entertain, to inspire, not to hide. Real magic happens not when you trick others into believing your illusion, but when you reveal the beauty of your truth. This shift will change your relationships. Some people will be uncomfortable with your honesty, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you'll reflect back to them their own masks. You might lose certain connections, but you'll gain others, the kind built on mutual respect, shared humanity, and unfiltered connection. It will also change how you view yourself. You'll stop chasing perfection and start honoring your imperfections. You'll stop waiting for permission to be real. You'll stop apologizing for your feelings, your failures, your softness. And you'll realize that the parts you once hid are often the most beautiful. The cracked places where the light gets in. And over time, you'll see that the performance you thought kept you safe was actually a prison. That freedom was never in applause, but in presence. That your worth was never in how well you played a role, but in your willingness to be who you truly are. When you begin shedding the magician's shadow, life softens in strange, unexpected ways. It isn't that problems vanish or pain ceases. It's that you stop adding layers of illusion to your suffering. You feel what you feel. You own what you need. You say what's true. And in doing so, you reclaim your agency. The anxiety of keeping up appearances dissolves. The exhausting habit of rehearsing conversations in your mind fades. You no longer waste your life on perfect timing, perfect words, perfect personas. You just live. The magician's shadow teaches you to bargain with life. If I'm good enough, successful enough, needed enough, then maybe I'll be loved. Then maybe I'll feel worthy. But what if you stopped negotiating and started belonging? Belonging not to the audience, but to yourself. Not to applause, but to your breath. Not to perfection, but to the sacred mess of being human. Because in the end, this life will not ask you how convincing your performance was. It won't care how carefully you concealed your wounds. It will ask whether you lived while you were here, whether you allowed yourself to be seen, whether you touched the hearts of others not by dazzling them, but by daring to meet them in the depths. The journey out of illusion is one of practice. It's not a single moment of enlightenment, but thousands of small choices. To speak the truth when a lie would be easier. To rest when the world demands performance. To feel the sting of vulnerability and stay open anyway. Every time you choose honesty over image, you loosen the magician's hold. And slowly, the world around you begins to change. You draw people who speak from the heart, who aren't afraid to say, I don't know, or I was wrong, or I'm hurting. These are your people, not because they're perfect, but because they've made peace with their imperfection. And with them, you can rest. You can laugh without performing, cry without shame, love without calculation. These relationships heal you, not because they fix your pain, but because they make it safe to feel. Even your solitude transforms. Where once you feared silence, now you find comfort there. Where once your thoughts were relentless, now they soften. The inner critic loses its edge. The old scripts sound foreign. The need to prove yourself fades. In its place grows a simple, steady presence. A quiet knowing that you are enough, without the act, without the applause, without the disguise. This doesn't mean you'll never perform again. The magician's shadow is ancient and clever. It will slip back in when you're tired, when you feel threatened, when old wounds reopen. But you'll notice it now. You'll see the flicker of illusion in your words, the familiar tightening in your chest, the temptation to escape into a polished version of yourself. And when you notice, you get to choose. This is where real power lies. Not in controlling others' perceptions, but in owning your truth. Not in becoming untouchable, but in becoming radically alive. In feeling grief without rushing to fix it. In experiencing joy without bracing for loss. In standing in your fear and moving anyway. The magician's shadow taught you survival. But now, it's time to learn how to live. To trade control for curiosity. To swap perfection for presence. To remember that life is not a show to be managed, but a mystery to be inhabited. When you do this, you unlock something ancient in yourself. The part of you that was never meant to perform. The part that knows how to sit under a night sky and feel wonder. The part that feels tears as holy, anger as sacred, softness as strength. The part that remembers how to listen to the wind, to your gut, to the quiet voice inside that always knew the way home. And this, strangely, is where your greatest magic lies. Not in the illusions you craft, but in the courage to live without them. In the audacity to be ordinary. In the willingness to be misunderstood. In the sacred art of belonging to yourself. This kind of life is quieter than the performance. Less dramatic, less admired by crowds. But it is deeper and infinitely more satisfying. It feels like a soft exhale after years of holding your breath, like finding a room in your heart you forgot existed, like finally, mercifully, coming home. The work of dismantling the magician's shadow never truly ends, but it gets easier. You laugh at yourself more. You stop taking your persona so seriously. You let others be wrong about you. You stop explaining. You start listening. You choose relationships where you can be raw over ones where you have to be impressive. You learn that peace isn't found in applause, but in honesty. And so you live. Not perfectly, but fully. Not always bravely, but openly. You lose some people along the way. You lose illusions, and with them, the weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. In their place, you gain lightness. You gain depth. You gain the kind of relationships that don't need masks to feel close. The kind of solitude that doesn't feel like loneliness. The kind of nights where you look at the stars and feel not small, but vast. Because in the absence of illusion, what's left is truth. And truth, however imperfect, however inconvenient, is the only thing worth building a life upon. So if you're listening to this now, consider this your invitation. To drop the act, to meet yourself where you are, to let someone see you without the show, to remember the one who lives beneath the performance. The child who laughed too loud, the teenager who felt too much, the adult who forgot they didn't have to be flawless to be loved. You were never meant to be a magician forever. It's time to lay down your illusions and live.